Okay, good morning, everyone. So welcome to this, it's a kind of a discussion, panel discussion, but this is on behalf of the Fair Implementation Profile and Practice Working Group of the FDO Forum. So this is, our contribution to the conference the last couple of days. And so we'll say a little bit more about the working group and the topic for today, and then introduce speakers. And so I should say too, Barbara and I are co-leading this working group together. We initiated this knowing that FIPs might have some interesting relationship to the FDO, and that's actually the meat of the discussion today. So here's the agenda. We'll do some introductory remarks to kind of set the stage, give context. And then we have 5 esteemed panelists to help us work out the details today. And we will ask them to each give a 5-minute introduction to themselves and to just kind of a high-level remark about their experience with fair implementation profiles and maybe how they would see the relationship between FIPs and a greater context of the FDO. So if that goes by schedule, then about 9:40, we can just open it up for a discussion. And Barbara and I have prepared some leading questions, but we can just see where the discussion goes. So in a way, this could even be just a very technical kind of hackathon discussion. This is really meant to get into some of the details. One other element to this agenda, I'm actually double booked. I have to go across the hallway and do a 5-minute lightning talk in the data science group. So I'm going to do that now. Okay, I can. Let me do some initial slides, and then and then Barbara has some of her own slides that I think are very instructive as well. Okay, so just a basic introduction or grounding in the fair implementation profile. Here's a definition. It is a declared, it's a list of declared technology choices that are meant or intended to actually implement each of the FAIR principles. All right, so you can go through the list of the FAIR principles, these 15 one-liners, and if you've actually implemented FAIR, it should be possible to be very explicit about the technologies running those fair operations. This list is made as a collective decision by members of a community of practice. So there's some group that is committing. And I'll step onto camera. Thank you. So it's really a list composed of a fair implementation community, right, and their list of fair enabling resources. Those are ontological terms. So there's an ontology that describes that list and some of the other things that happen around it, so that we can actually create, using some tooling that we have with nanopublications, we can create machine actionable fair implementation profiles. So it's really a nanopub index that's indexing a bunch of nanopublications talking about fair enabling resources. We've had some very nice recent experiences with FIPs and kind of deploying them. So they had their origin in GoFair. In January 2019, we had a big meeting of GoFair implementation networks. At that time, the exercise was very loosely constrained. It was, a big Google spreadsheet that everyone had access to, and it was just free text, fill in the blanks. Who are you as a community, and how are you approaching F1, F2, F3? So that was a very rich but very difficult set of responses to interpret. So over time, we've refined this idea of the FIP and the questionnaires behind it, and trying to get more and more focused on what exactly do we need to make these machine actionable FIPs. By well, let's say over that time period from 2019 till now, and including next year, the ENVI-FAIR project has been a big supporter and developer around this whole method and the tooling. So we've had very good success now. There's something like 57 FAIR implementation profiles representing these 14 research infrastructures and how they're attempting in ENVI-FAIR to find convergence among these data repositories. And then now recently, there's also the World FAIR project, and that's being coordinated by CODATA, and that's working with 11 broadly defined domains that are trying to use FIPS to drive, ultimately, kind of cross-domain interoperability. And Arofan is here today on the panel. He's been very much involved in that. This is just an indication that, you know, the FIPP and practice working group, you can find more documentation on it at the FDO forum website. So this is just the page, and I think it's nice to point out we have some membership here. These people were really contributing to the development of the state-of-the-art of FIPS at the moment. And I think we're going to put out a call today for people, for more members to join the FIPP and practice working group. There were two kind of stated focus areas of the working group. The first is that, well, FIPS, being these social, technical elements, can maybe help drive convergence. In fact, that's sort of their primary purpose in life. It's really to drive convergence among different communities on FAIR implementations. But there's always this, this like second thought, this intuition that a lot of people have, and that's like, wait a minute, these FIPs kind of describe your approach to FAIR. If we had FAIR digital objects, would they also have FIPs? Well, they're somehow implementations, so they must have some kind of corresponding, you know, FAIR implementation profile. So the question is, can the FIPs also play a role in some way, maybe like as metadata, in FDOs? And then, you know, if you take it one step further, what would be the actual relationship then between the FIPP and an FDO? And so that's, so the first topic is maybe what Barbara and I have been developing with ENVI-FAIR and with World FAIR, but this is really the topic for today. Yeah. And here I'm gonna momentarily say goodbye and hand over to Barbara.
Okay, so the last 4 days we have heard a lot about the uptake of the FIPs in different communities. And especially in the FAIR Convergence Symposium, we had 2 sessions that really showed that it was appreciated to have a tool like the FIPP, because it helped communities to find out which implementations they have in place to approach fair data, or how to go to make their data more fair. And the issue is that we have an approach that works somehow at a certain level, but is more experimental still, as behind all this stuff, at the end, it was Erik's ideas and my implementation. So it's just a 2 persons work with some interactions with other experts, but doing the hard work was based on 2 people. And therefore, it's not professional at all. And with many people using the tool at the same time, it becomes critical. Yeah, we have to not disappoint users if the system crashes, and yeah, it's a lot of effort that also people put in when filling out the questionnaire and so on. So we have to make this more sustainable. So what is needed to make it a professional FIPP service out of it? I think I could identify a few necessary assets that we need to implement in the next months. So we need a search engine to increase findability. Well, we have a search engine. We have a Sparkle. We have a triple store of the nano publications, and if you can sparkle, you can search over it. But it's not really user-friendly for most of the people. We need to increase interoperability, so we have to map resources. So fair enabling resources are, for example, also metadata schema. Yeah, there are many repositories with metadata about metadata schemas. There are many repositories for vocabularies, so there are lots of resources out there and lots of metadata about these resources. So we are creating another way to describe these resources with having another target, another idea behind, but we are creating metadata about these. What we need to do is to map these resources. We want to increase also the reusability. This exercise of filling out the questionnaire takes time. It's a lot of effort, so we need to make sure that this is also used in another context. For example, data management plans, data stewardship plans, they are addressing similar issues. So how can we use the FIPP in this context? And most importantly, also interesting for this group, we have to increase the machine actionability. So probably I have not really understood the topic, but for me, FIPs at the moment are machine readable, but not really actionable. So to make it actionable, there are other steps to be really done. First of all, as I said, 2 people, many FIPs, much more fair enabling resources, up to 1,000 or I don't know, we'll find out next week. They need to be qualified. It's not me doing this anymore, hopefully. We will find out a way how to semi-automatize the qualification of fair enabling resources. There was the discussion, well, now we have the implementation choices. Nice, but what does it say? Yeah, is it really helpful for achieving fair? Because some of the choices might not be so fair themselves. So there should be a mechanism how to identify the fair score or level of these resources. It's not so easy because we are not talking about data. We are talking about services that help to achieve some level of fairness of the data. We are talking about specifications. We are talking about vocabularies, data usage license, etc. So they are not all to be treated in the same way. So how can we identify their fair score? And at the end, also when we have this list of fair enabling resources and they are machine readable, is it enough for machines to understand how to really what actions, what operations are possible with this data? I don't know. I think there's something missing. And this is why we have really to analyze what we have and to go a step further. And this requests your input, these brains, to help us to make it a good tool. Because this tool now seems to be really something that can be used by many communities, and it should be not the GFF tool, it's just we initiated it. This is something that can be just improved and professionalized by the community of fair data stewards. So I have here, Erik would say, much too complicated diagrams. I just go very briefly through it. Might be that later we need them, yeah, in the discussion. So we have a FIPP wizard, that's a tool for the questionnaire. We have the nanobench, that's a tool to mint nano publications. Nanobench is used for the publication of fair enabling resources. The FIPP wizard is used to publish fair implementation profiles, which is a collection of these fair enabling resources. But the FIPP wizard can also publish fair enabling resources because we have enhanced it. So at the end, we get FIPs and fairs, yeah. But to find them, yes, you can use the triple store, but I think it's better to think about what the user really needs to find these resources in a way that's helpful. And we have to identify the technical requirements for that. To have then at the end a very nice search engine, and we think that Fair Connect could be the portal. I don't know if you have heard about it, but it's a portal for data stewardship focused on FAIR. And we want to implement a search engine there. Lots of developments needed there. Then to increase the interoperability of fair enabling resources, we have to be aware that there are other services. For example, I'm showing this for the fair sharing platform registry. They have also resources. Yeah. The problem at the beginning, I wanted just to use those, but they are not really addressing each of the sub-principles. But I think 70% you can also find there, but we need more. Yeah. So we have different fair enabling resource types. They have also types. Then what we need to do is to do a mapping. We have already done this mapping. I'm working together with Alison List on this. But now we are implementing the mapping service so that it is not done everything manually, to have at the end map resources. But it's not finished, so there's something to do. Then we need to increase the usability. So we have FIPs, but we have also data management plans. They have something in common. Yeah, not everything, but there's some overlap. Well, they are all based on a template. It's in the FIPP in the wizard, the data stewardship wizard. It's called the knowledge base, something like that, knowledge model. Yeah, it's like a conceptual model at the end. And for the DMP, there's a data management template, or it is also a schema defining the questions and the possible answers. So, but mostly these data management plans are not machine actionable or machine readable, so I'm a bit confused. But we need to increase the machine readability of these templates, and this can be done also in the wizard, for example, but also in other tools that are around. So what we need, when these are more machine actionable, we need again to make a mapping. Yeah, this is also done partially already, and we have written the first paper about it. And then we can develop the FIPP to DMP tool. And we are very close to it. I think by end of November we have that tool, because Marek Suchanek is helping a lot. He is from Code Events, the company that builds the wizard tool. Then we want to increase the machine actionability. So what needs to happen? We have now many fair enabling resources already minted. Not probably all are minted. There are at the moment many of them just on my Excel sheet. Yeah, getting there. But at the end, people want to mint them somehow. But probably it's better before they mint them that we have a look at the Excel sheet very carefully, because they are getting in the hundreds, in the thousands. Wow, yeah. What we want is also reuse. That's why we are using the FIPP wizard. The FIPP wizard allows you to really search through existing fair enabling resources before you mint your own. So that's the idea, right? We don't want to have the same thing in the same tool. Well, the world will be anyhow multiplying the same thing somewhere we are not aware of. So we should be very good in cleaning up the fair enabling resources that will be minted or are minted. So we have to look at them, analyze them, group them, and really sort out apples to apples, cherries to cherries, to find out, is that really something that we can use? Yeah. This is still a manual process, but it's needed because we have to find out what does this say to us. Yes, at the end we have to filter them out, the things that we don't need, but this helps us to find out what are the errors that people are still producing because probably there's something, a misinterpretation of the concept or something. So we have to develop Shackle rules or any rules that help to make a validation service to qualify the resources. Well, then we have this automated fair neighboring resource qualification. Fine. Then we have to refine the fair type definition based on this analysis. Probably we will end up with a bit a different definition. We have also to identify interdependencies between the fair neighboring resources. Danny? Yeah, you have sent yesterday a very nice first approach to that, how these things are related, and probably this will influence the whole concept. So we have probably to refine the FIPP model, which is not really nice because it interrupts the whole process. So we have to maintain backwards compatibility. But at the end, what we will get is a machine actionable, more actionable than before, a metadata for fair digital objects. And I think we have also to identify very specific requirements for the fair digital object. We have to identify what is still missing. I think there's something missing, then the knowledge is not really in a nano publication. There you need much more. Then we have also to refine the FIPP model again. And probably what we also need is to find out which of these fair neighboring resources might get a score. Not all of these types are useful for scoring. We have to develop tests for the fair evaluator of for specific types, and then we have a fair score for some fair enabling resources depending on their type. And this all will help, I think, to increase the machine actionability of the output of the fair enabling resources, and then I think we are quite ready to have something valuable for the fair digital object itself. So I am done with my introduction. It was a bit longer, but I think it's a good basis to start this discussion. Yeah, what I wanted, last sentence, I wanted to say, you see, it's a lot of work. I'm not going to do this alone. No, I need you. I need your help. I need Tobias. I need everybody here who can really is interested to use this in future. Because this is not a GFF tool, this is the tool of the community. And for those that are interested to use FIPs in future in other communities, we offer train the trainer possibility so that you really get trained how to use this stuff. And those that want to become trainers, they can just come. It doesn't cost anything because we have these FIP events anyhow. They are financed by communities, but for the trainers, this is just come, learn. It's not done just by visiting us. We want you to learn more and to assist us in future workshops, because we will have many workshops. So please join the FIPP group, and we will be very happy. Good. Now?
Yeah. Next slide. Yeah. So, what we need to do now is have an introduction from our panel. And so what we would like to do is have the panel come up and maybe take a seat, and we'll just go down the line and ask you to, in that 5-minute interval, introduce yourself and just maybe your own impression or experience with fair implementation profiles. Yeah. So please, panel. Everyone thought probably this was the panel. Oh, absolutely. Okay, great. So yeah, we'll record everything, so people should try and remember to take a microphone. But Tobias, I'll have to give you the microphone, and we can start with you. and I'll set the clock for 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Welcome, everybody. So my involvement in the FIPs and all the things that were presented here was the more technical nanopublication part, the technology I worked on. And yeah, nanopublications are kind of FDO, a kind of fair digital object. And I think the very, yeah, I'll just say a very few words about that, because I think that shows the power of nanopublications and also how they can help here. The main difference, I would say, or the main kind of way in which nanoapplications are special FDOs is that nanoapplications can say something about other things. And an FDO in general cannot really, unless it has a certain type that you understand. Up to that point, it's just a bit sequence, as we have heard many times in this conference. And nanoapplications are not just a bit sequence, but they have, in a well-defined vocabulary, it's based on RDF, they say something about anything. About digital things, about non-digital things, anything. And that's what we used here for the fair implementation profiles, where these nanopublications refer to digital things like data sets or vocabularies, which you can see as digital, I guess, but also non-digital ones like communities and questions, things one has to answer. So we use that, and now all these fair implementation profiles are a collection of nanopublications that are fair digital objects, if you want to call them like that, but they're also machine understandable, interpretable. So yeah, now we can build upon it to make them also machine actionable in some concrete ways. Yeah, I think that's what I want to say.
Well done, Tobias.
Or you have your own mic?
No, that's installed by Luiz. So good morning, everyone. So my name is Yann Lefranc. I'm the CEO and technical director of a company called eScience Data Factory, based in Paris. We've been working for the last 8 years in the fields of research and a lot of European research projects to build the European Open Science Cloud. And in particular, we bring in our expertise on semantic web technology, linked data, ontology design, to help scientists to use actually the ontology. So we developed several tools. And I'm also co-chair of the FDO-SEM, which is the FDO working group on building the semantic web specification of the FDO. So working with Luiz. Actually, unfortunately, I couldn't be there Wednesday for the session. I was in another meeting. And so I discovered the FIPP by listening a lot to Barbara. Actually, recently she gave a presentation to the community in one of our projects, which is called OntoCommons. This project aims to help industry to annotate their data with ontologies. And so Barbara kindly presented the FIPP, and I think it's a great tool to actually aggregate knowledge community by community so that you understand how each community implements FAIR principles, and then you can compare them. And so, of course, they will be a good addition for FDO. Maybe what I do foresee is, like, first, this is already linked data, thanks to Tobias with the nano publication. So it could be certainly added to the FDO model provided by Luiz, or for the specification, and could be used as a sort of way to check, like a shackle shape, that would check that basically your community FDO is actually according the template you predefined together. So, but I propose that we discuss that here. And so now I leave Luiz.
Yeah, good morning. Luiz Bonino, worked for the Go Fair International Support Office here in the Netherlands when we had that. Now I'm in between the Leiden University Medical Center here and the University of Twente. And I've been involved in this fair stuff from, since almost 9 years now. And my participation in the fair movement so far has been almost exclusively trying to design and develop some technologies. I'm from a technical background that could facilitate the implementation or the realization of the FAIR principles. And if you look at the FAIR principles, we have some of them can be, or some parts of them can be, let's say, satisfied by technological elements, infrastructure, and things like that. Some others required some social agreements. And one particularly difficult principle to check the compliance of is the R1.3, that the data and metadata follow domain relevant community standards. Nice. So I can declare, okay, I follow this standard. Good. Let's see if you actually do that. But then, so this is the first question. The second question is that, yeah, but is this relevant for which community, right? How can we check if those things that you are embedded in one community, how can we really, from one point of view, want to check if that's actually the case, and from the other point of view, who is creating that resource, you would like to, the person would like actually to reuse things from its community, because nobody is really, very big fans of reinventing the wheel over and over. It's much easier and faster and cheaper to reuse something. But what are my community relevant standards, right? And I think that the FIPs can significantly help that by providing sets of community endorsed fair enabling resources. And then while watching the presentation from Barbara, I was imagining that we need a recursive verification of this, right? So I have a resource, I'm declaring that I use those, I create a FIP, I declare that I'm using these fair enabling resources. And then I have to, we could go to that specific resource and see how this resource is actually enabling fair. Right, because one thing is just say I use this fair enabling resource, but how? In which degree this resource contributes to the fairness? Which principle, which part of the principle this thing is solving for me? So it will be very interesting to have this clarity because it's something that together with Giancarlo we have been discussing a lot lately about transparency, about explainability. And then this improves transparency enormously because then you know I use this because this contributes to that part of the fairness and so forth. So that's
Arofan, Gregory. I work with CODATA. I'm one of the people in the World Fair project that's trying to make sense of a bunch of FIPs being done by 11 different domain groups as part of that project, a 2-year European project. I come out of the social, behavioral, and economic sciences. People talk about fair. Well, these gentlemen are all talking about technology, not so much you. But to me, fair is not about technology. There are always technologies and tools. Fair is fundamentally people committing to documenting data and resources so they can be shared. And I believe in just informed decision making. So what is the information that you're making decisions on the basis of? If you want to verify a community, the first thing you have to know is where are you? And so in World Fair, we're using FIPs as a way of finding out just how bad is the situation, how good is the situation. And this means exactly what you were talking about, Luiz, which is that what are the standards that are being used and who's actually using them? Once you have that information, and in the form of nanopubs in this case, then you can begin to quantify that. Coming out of the social, behavioral, economic sciences, I work with a lot of survey data and try to operate on that programmatically. You have to get the quantified data somewhere to make decisions with. A FIP is a short questionnaire for doing that, basically, in my mind. And it's an amazingly good tool because it gets communities thinking in the same way about the same problem. FAIR is fundamentally about exchange between communities, and that they have to talk in the same language and measure themselves in the same way so you can look across them and generate metrics that are meaningful. But I think it's important to remember that fundamentally it's actioning a commitment, right? That's what FAIR is. So in the future, I think they could be a really cool runtime resource in and of themselves. But I don't think where we are today that that's what they really are. I think they're that tool for quantifying information about shareability of data, and that should be done in a systematic way. And FIPs are maybe not the best methodology for doing that, but they're the right tool for the job, and they're not a bad one, basically. I think, as Barbara said, they'll get better, and they will. But I've never met a survey that didn't get improved by the methodologists forever. So that's not unusual. But I think FIPs are an amazingly good tool for approaching that in a systematic way.
Good morning. Hi, my name is Sharif. I'm a data architect here in Netherlands. I'm also involved in the Disco project and also the Enrifair project that just mentioned. So I went to the first training session and I used the tool for Disco. So I can also say it's a very nice tool, very easy to use. And the NanoPub makes it also, nice index that you can search and import and do lots of interesting things. And one of the interesting things about NanoPub is that it has the, a public key verification, and you can add your public key and also add your ORCID, so you can see, connect the ORCID with other things as well. So that's good. So what I'm struggling with right now is sort of take this to the next level. Like, for example, as you know, in the European projects we have work packages. So I've showed the tool to some of the work package members in Disco, and we filled it out together, so we have a nice idea. And also in the Enrifair we saw the sort of the convergence with different things, so that was helpful. But it's still not into the day-to-day discussions of the work package. When we make our plans, when we make our deliverables, it's not still there. So I need help with that, to think about that, where who can I talk with to think about this in a more day-to-day fashion. Because I think what happened is that we sat together, we filled out the form, we submitted, and then we kind of forgot about it. So it's there, but we haven't revisited. So I think the connection with the data management plan would be interesting, to see how to make it actually like really day-to-day actionable. And another thing I'm thinking, in the FDO technical specification group, we have a document called FDO configuration type. It's basically a fancy way of saying, how do you make an FDO? How do you put all of these pieces together and make an FDO? For example, what is the identifier resolution service? What is the repository? What is the ontology service, or things like that? So if you make a small section of FDO or granularity, what are those things? So they have came up with 10 or different types of examples, sort of a mix and match thing that okay, let's say you don't have access to identifier service, but you have access to this. Can this be an FDO? Can this be an FDO configuration? So that could be an interesting link for all of those configuration type. If I mix A, B, and C, are those fair enabling resources, and are those linking to the FIPP? So that might be something interesting. And then similar to the work package level discussions, I also want to see how we can bring in the developers in this. So currently in Disco we're doing a lot of stuff with the persistent identifier system and the data model that goes in the persistent identifier system. We're doing a lot of things with the annotation model, with W3C standards. So those things are basically input for the programmers. We're taking the data model and telling the programmers, like, okay, try to fit into the system. So that would be also interesting to see, how this can be also input for them. So, thank you.
I would like to react to your question, what do we do with the FIPP after we have done this exercise? Well, you are part of Enrifair, but Disco started with this process a little bit later than the other research infrastructures, and I can only tell you you were at on Wednesday at the fair. Well, there was an event of the Enrifair communities presenting the output of this FIPP exercise, and actually those that started at the beginning and repeated this exercise each year, they could see how the implementation changed over the time and what improved. And actually it was part of a complete roadmap. So the FIPP is the starting point to find out where community research infrastructures stands now in regard to FAIR principles. And then you identify the gaps. Okay, we don't have questions for specific aspects. So there seems to be a need to look into that. And this helped to prioritize the developments that need to happen. So they started to, they included these considerations in the implementation plans of the research infrastructures. And then they developed it, some parts, and then they made again the FIPP statements. And this improved each year. So there are some communities that really could find this as a helpful step forward to streamline the developments that need to happen.
Yeah, I think then we have a little bit of disconnect there, so we'll probably need to see how that. I think that the challenge with the European projects is that there's so many different organizations involved in the work packages. It's tricky to get them together. and
also the maturity.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I think DISCO is a really great example where things can happen from the beginning in a fair way.
Yeah, we're still in the preparation phase. So
but that's an advantage, right? Whereas the others are so mature that they have already solutions that work for 10 years, but they are not very mobile. They stay there where they are, and they think it's somehow working for them. Fair is a little bit difficult, so why should I invest? Yeah. Please.
Yeah, okay. Excuse me. So thank you, panel. That's nice introductions. Great discussion, and all within time. So that was really nice. We have some leading questions on the screen, but maybe it's nice as well to kind of just open the floor. Was there any other points to be made? So Barbara, you just kind of had a follow-up point. But if there's no other discussion at the moment, then I think we would jump to... So maybe there's questions from the audience.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Hello, I have a question for Arofan. Am I correct in pronouncing it? Arofan?
Arofan.
Yeah, anyway, sorry. It's a French name, I can't pronounce. So you just mentioned that you think that FAIR is not quite about technology. You think it's more about the community doing something, reaching a common... take some actions together. I wonder if you think that actually, and you also mentioned that the technology is mostly there. I think, well, I also have a technical background, so I kind of disagree on that. Do you think that all the things are already there, therefore we just need to adapt, or actually there's a lot more we can do? I kind of feel a bit confused when you mentioned that way.
I work largely in communities that have been effectively sharing and reusing data at a fairly broad scope for 20 years now. It is possible with existing technologies, when correctly applied, to effectively reuse data. Darren, is that true? UK Data Archive, does anybody use your data? No. There are organizations like where Darren works in the UK at Essex that do nothing but reuse data. And that's their whole purpose. The limiting factor to me are the agreements within communities to document data sufficiently that it can be reused and to put it out in a standard way so that other people, when they get it, can do something with it. To me, FAIR is all about that. And it's not that the technologies can't be improved, and a lot of what you're hearing here is about those improvements and making that easier for people to do and to scale better. And I think that's a great thing. But fundamentally, you have to get people serious about reusing their data and documenting it, and that's expensive and hard. And people don't want to do it. They want to wave their hand and say, oh, I've got a DOI, I'm fair, and that's nonsense. And so to me, the first problem you have to solve is the social problem. The technology then is implemented in a smart way to support that. And I think FIPs do that in a really good way with the nanopubs and with some of the other approaches. Connecting them to FDOs, very cool. But it's cool for what end, right? You have a great sports car, you've got nowhere to drive. What's the point of that, right?
Thanks. Can I ask a
Can we have first his...
Oh, sorry, yeah. I'm Darren Belfoot, I head up the UK Data Service. Just to follow on from what Arofan was saying, where I'm struggling with a lot of this is that there's a huge set of elaborate specifications and infrastructure now being built out on what looks to me like a set of, as it says, guiding principles rather than axiomatic statements. And that's what really worries me about that. 2 years down the line, when we go, okay, fair, oh, hang on, there's a missing letter that we forgot about. How are you going to start re-engineering all of this? So to me, fair FDOs and FIPs are, as Arofan might have implied, more pegs to hang useful conversations and assessment practices on. To me, FIPs are almost like a project assessment and information gathering exercise, I don't see how they advance interoperability at all in a way that we can't do already, just agreeing on common standards.
Thank you. I sensed a disconnect in purpose, or that I want to explore that between Arofan and Sharif. Arofan was saying that the FIPP is very valuable as a survey to sort of get the state of how one is. I think what Sharif is maybe more looking for is viewing the FIPP as a plan that would sort of, he says like, oh, it's just on a shelf, it's supposed to help us. But then Barbara was saying, no, in the spirit of assessment, FIPP might be something you do over and over again as more of a monitoring tool, observability tool, self-assessment, rather than a planning tool. So I'd like to hear people's comments on that, of kind of the role of the FIPP in clarifying that. Yeah.
Do you want to start or shall I?
Sure, go for it. Yeah, I think the DOI is a good example. So, for example, we have a lot of conversation within our biodiversity community, like, what is persistence about DOI? A lot of people say that, I have my own identifier, I can just maintain that, why do I need to spend all of these resources to be DOI friendly and things like that? So then that's the social question comes in. I mean, there's nothing magic about that string of persistent identifier. There's social things. So one way we can use this sort of planning is that, okay, how persistent is your persistent identifier? So there could be some guidelines, but when we do the fair implementation plan, I can say, okay, I'm using DOI, I'm using a handle, but there has to be something a little bit more there, either direct me to that fair enabling resources in my community, and there should be enough metadata that tells me that, let's say, for example, we are part of a DOI consortium that ensures, long-term sustainability of this community. There's actually a trustworthy organization behind these metadata plan. So those could be sort of link from FIPP to the community and to the resources sort of describing. But I think it has to come from the community as well, that, okay, we have to provide those metadata. I cannot just have a web page that says, okay, we are persistent and it's done. And there's a lot of ways to do it. I mean, there's also a lot of work done sort of different levels of persistency, what that means. So I think I agree. There is a disconnection of how to use it, but I think one of the reason is also flexibility of this tool. I think we can also keep it at, there's no one way to use the FIPP.
I want to agree with everything you said. Be aware. And World Fair is a great example of this. The first round of FIPPs we're doing is, where are we today? How bad is it? We're trying to get a level set on 11 different domains as to their practices around fair. And they have to have conversations around the same topics to get a sense of that. At the end of the project, we're going to do another round of FIPPs. But the cool thing about the FIPPs, and Barbara showed this in the ontology, you can say not, this is what we use. You can also say formally, this is what we are intending to use. We can even say, this is what we're using today, and we're getting rid of it, right? And that degree of nuance makes it both a good tool for describing where you are and also where you intend to go. And I think the value of knowing where you are is then you can make an intelligent decision about how as a community you converge in future. And so I think what you're talking about is the visibility of this stuff to help drive those decisions, and I completely agree with that. We need a repository of FIPPs that lets people look and say, oh, what are other communities doing? What are people in my community doing? What should I do? And that's where it enters the planning stages. But we need that infrastructure so we can see them.
I just want to add something about this discussion, because in NREFAIR, this was not used just to make this to identify the state where we are, but it was part of the roadmap. So it's also not the planning tool. Yeah, it's just one part of the whole story. Yeah, and then you can use it, or depending on your use case also. Yeah, so we have many different use cases where FIPPs can play a role. So
Barbara, maybe I would like to make one comment on this as well, and also Franz, I think, would be the next after this one. Okay. But there's also a kind of a data science component to the FIPPs. So in NREFAIR alone, we have 57 FIPPs over 3 years. Arofan, I don't know if there's like 11 FIPPs now in World Fair.
More than
there's more than that, right? So imagine if, we can think of all the different research communities out there. If they were to compose FIPs, if they were forced to do that, and under pressure, they might say, well, we could develop our own FIP, or make it easy, we could maybe borrow an existing FIP already, because maybe we have the belief that this particular FIP over here is already working just fine, and if we could adopt that in our own community, then we could be not only fair, but we would be interoperating for sure with that community anyways. So I just want to point out that we're getting this potentially this very large universe of fair implementation profiles that can give us a very interesting view of the technology landscape on an emerging fair infrastructure, but then it immediately begins to set up strategies or opportunities for making strategies about, where do we really consolidate or converge, and do we have a smart plan for maybe more global development? So you can do this for the sake of your own community, but there might be a collective element to it as well. Yeah, here. Please.
Well, actually, I think my question has been answered. So I want just you, Barbara, to point out some, let's say, implementations of FIPS within every fair, but they should be there on the website probably. Or
well, that's they are in the FIP wizard, but the FIP wizard is not a great tool to look over them. They are in the triple store. You can sparkle. So it's also all not fine. Therefore, I said we need Fair Connect, a nice search engine over them, also to really filter out, I'm from this domain. What other solutions, what other FIPs are there that can help me in my implementation plan? So, yes?
Thank you. Frans van den Boom. I'm with the Human Immunome project, and one of the projects that I'm involved in is a EU-India collaboration supported by DPT in India and the Commission. So there's, it's on pandemic influenza. So you have animal studies, you have clinical trials, you have the development of new assays, you have the immunology work, etc., etc. And we're talking about communities here. And if I look at that project alone, we at least have 4 communities. We have the community of people sitting here, developing tools, services, protocols, guidelines in order to get fair data and make sure that data are reusable, which is absolutely essential. That's one community. Then we have the community in that project, and there's 14 labs, 14 institutions involved. It's a typical EU-India project. The second issue is that each of these different institutions talks different languages, has different, has different formats, etc., etc. So that's why we embarked upon a collaboration with the Go Fair Foundation in order to have a delegated system of data collection, etc., etc. So that's the second community, the 14, 15 labs involved. Then the third community is the people, the data scientists and the people in the labs. They love this because they see the immediate relevance of what needs to be done. We want to communicate, we want to share the data at a certain point. Either we visit the data or we pool the data, but we want to do that analysis. And then the fourth community is the leadership of the consortium, who basically says, what a nuisance. We don't have enough money, we don't have enough time, and now these people come in and they request time from our lab managers, from our data scientists to talk about FAIR, to talk about FIPs, to talk about FAIR data points, to talk about FDOs. Do the minimal. The best thing is do nothing about it, do the minimal. So how do we create a mechanism where we have all of these different interests and communities really commit to this I think, extremely important initiative or task or whatever you want to call it. Maybe a little bit beyond the scope of this particular section.
Is this an answer?
It's related.
Well, Sian, what's your question? Is it related?
No,
Then is it okay?
So Barbara, just one point of order. We got a half hour to go, and it's a great discussion. And if we want to stay in this realm, that's fine by me. But the mission of today was to actually get a little bit more technical. Understood.
Okay, so I'm Romain David. I work in ERINA, that is a European research infrastructure that work on highly pathogenic agents. And we are leading a project that's called Isidore, that is the preparedness of pandemic services in research. So we are federating 156 structures in 17 research infrastructure in Europe. And we tried 2 years ago to put an interest on fair implementation profile. So it's reasoning with your presentation because we have several levels of interest and we need some adopting context to provide this kind of tools. So first comment is one FIP is not enough for a team, it's not enough for a lab, and it's not enough for research infrastructure, and in a project, how to organize it. So it's related to the last question about FIPP interoperability and what we have in mind. But you know, the preparedness of the pandemic during the last 2 years was a really hard work because all people were very busy. But we are dealing with science that are interoperating not only animal science, but also clinical science, epidemiology science, and also socio-economic science, and so on. And we want to do all these peoples working together. So last thing about that, it's that, okay, we want to have adoption case, but we need collections of FIPs. That's something really important to communicate in the right way to all these people. So I think that you have this in mind.
Can I comment on that, on both? So I think that from both comments, one thing that it's clear is that we have different stakeholders and different types of stakeholders that have different incentives. And then we have to adjust the message depending on the type of the stakeholder, and also try to address the incentives that each one of these types they have. Just a very short example. A few years ago, I was invited to go meet with the executives of a large multinational, and was not we researchers, not the head of the R&D department, were the C-level, 30-something C-level executives of that organization. And what they said is that we need those kind of things. So we are tired of wasting 90% of the time of our people that deal with data because they cannot find the data that we know that we have. It's a large organization spread across continents. We know that they have this data. It sometimes takes weeks for one of our people to find the data that we know that we have. So this is, it's not for the lack of money. It's not for the lack of infrastructure. It's for the lack of culture. So I also come back to that comment. FAIR is about the combination of social and technology. But at least in GoFair, I always said that mine was the easy job because it was about technology. Erik's was the hard one because it was about social interactions and agreements. So this culture has to change. We have the technology. If we don't have it ready, we know what to do. It's kind of clear. But the social agreements and social interactions and social awareness, that's very key and very hard to do and takes time. There is no way around it. It doesn't happen overnight.
I want to react to your comment, what to do if it's so complex and different domains, and how can you engage all these people? We are now involved in the PARC project. That's a partnership about chemical risk assessment. And this is also a very huge partnership, and I don't know how many labs are involved, over 200.
Yeah,
or
so Barbara, it's 200
yeah.
partners, not
And
only labs, but ministries.
I don't know how many
industry.
people are involved and so on, but
Yeah.
we thought, how can we approach this? And there is a way to do it. We have to. We are asked to help, and we thought, what if we start with our target, where we want to go? So apart from the situation that we have, yeah, we can also sketch down something that we want to achieve. But at the same time, you need also to be aware where you stand. So what are the very important stakeholders in these communities? Who will really influence and impede possible improvements? We have to look at them as well. So we do a few of these FIPs that are very critical, and then see what is needed to achieve what we really want to go forwards. And then we go to the different domains, but we won't make 200 FIPs or so. We will find a way in the middle to achieve this. But we started with Park this on September. We are sketching this out the next month, how we are really going to do this, and then I sent you some ideas if you are interested.
So just to say, work package 7 in Park is called FAIR, and just to give you the magnitude of the size, that work package is 30 million for FAIR, right? So it's a big project, maybe just one comment though, Barbara, following up on Luiz, and I'll start with Arofan though. Arofan mentioned, like, at the bottom, FAIR is about kind of these agreements for data sharing. I would add one other essential element to that. It's really about agreements for like machine mediated data sharing. So it's, for me, FAIR is kind of this interface between the human brain and a cyber world, you know, human knowledge and human conceptual models and this digital world. And I think Luiz is right. It's really the social technical thing. I see the FIPP as that interface, or is one element of that interface. It's where humans are coming in, making collective decisions among themselves for the sake of activating the machine on their behalf. So, okay.
I just want to defend my reputation. When
Yeah.
I say FAIR, I always mean machine actionable, not necessarily AI.
Indeed.
But I'm not talking about reading PDFs here, man. That's not fair.
Got it. Okay, there's a question from Steen. Yeah.
Okay, Erik, you wanted to go technical, so I hope I don't take it too far.
okay,
But I want to
awesome.
keep it on that social technical angle, because I just checked on fair sharing, and that Carol mentioned yesterday, they have already registered 1,500 standards and 2,000 databases. Right, so I see a very important role for the fair implementation profiles just to say, which one of those did I pick? And if it wasn't one of those, maybe you should even justify why, right? And it could be because it's a new and emerging field that haven't got the related standards and so on. Or maybe it's just because everyone wants to be special, right? There's a bit of both of that. But I wonder how, if we then look at the FDO, where we heard about how basically typing is a kind of uncharted territory still, about how do we deal with typing of the fair digital objects. And of course, a particular institutional repository or one particular research group taking the fair practices into consideration will have to make these choices, right? They have to select their standards and so on. And so they will need to build up a kind of ecosystem of different types, ecosystem of different resources that they have chosen to build. And to what extent do you think fair implementation profiles can be grouping all of these? Or is it the other way around, where each of the types are saying, actually, I'm part of these profiles, and so you can know what to expect when you navigate around the different objects? Because it's not just like one data set all alone. No, they're connected, right? That's the whole point.
Yeah, I think I mentioned this as a necessary improvement, that we have to look at how these are connected. It's an ecosystem. It's not one resource beside another one. They are connected. It's not
Yeah,
easy.
there's interdependencies for sure. Yeah, Christina, you had a question.
A comment, yeah. Well, yeah, Christina Hetner from the Leiden University Libraries, and I just wanted to maybe have another stakeholder perspective. So as trying to advise the thousands of researchers at Leiden University how they should go further in making the data fair, and then writing the data management plan with them, thinking about this, and the question about, which standards should I use? And I think that is really the key place for the FIPs, is this helping the researchers in thinking about making this choice. If they have, if there is a FIP, then and they know that they are part of a community, and then they can fill this out, and they just want to know what to do, right? They just want to know what to do, and if that is, that's what's my point.
Well, in Christina, we had this conversation going that a lot of data management plans so far have been very soft, and they're sort of just prompting questions. So, what vocabularies would you like to use? And you should choose a license. Which license would you like to use? And I think as fair implementation gets more real, and if there's a FIP that a community has created, you could create data management plans that are much more directive. So you will use these vocabularies if you want to claim to be a part of this community, right? And these are the licenses that this community has chosen to represent its assets. So I think there's also this transition where the DMP can become also something that's not just in the drawer. You complete the form and put it in the drawer and never see it again. It just really becomes then part of your daily routine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I completely agree with Christine that we have a challenge to the incentives, to bring incentives to our researchers to do things differently. But I hear in this discussion you and I, but I'm wondering who are you and I? Because sometimes it's a big infrastructure project, sometimes it's an individual researcher, and I feel that the FIP is a really nice tool, but it lacks focus on who is the customer. And I think we should maybe think about scenarios for who will use this and what is the environment of adoption, who are the decision makers. I think the remarks that were made just before was excellent. The decision makers, they really don't care about FAIR. They only care about the budget of the project.
Donnie, was this related?
I'll make it related.
yeah, I'll make it related. Okay. Got the connection. Okay. So bring this into some of the technical stuff, and specifically that second bullet point there. Should the FDO include a reference to FIP and some of the stuff I've noted on what you were saying? I think there's still a distinction to be made clear about FIP as survey versus commitment. For example, you said, maybe I could reuse a FIP. Well, if it's a survey, then categorically you can't reuse it. You might diff a target FIP from where you are and be like, this is where I want to go. And I think a potential connection point about the who currently in the FIP would be the data steward part of the FIP that connects to, this declaration was made by this community practice, was made by this data steward, and that data steward could be tied to be the same as the creator of an FDO and the steward of it. And then through a person network, one might, as a stakeholder, say, who are the data stewards under my employment, and is essentially how can I synthesize? So that would be my proposition for a technical connection point of associating people with the FIP, with the FDO. Yep. Interested in people's thoughts on that.
I just want to say the FIP allows both the status and where we go, because we have what do I plan and how do I want to substitute something that I'm using now. So it's both, but you had something.
Yeah, I think the role of the data steward is very difficult right now, because we don't have data stewards that can deliver, at least not in my organization, because they don't have power. And maybe the FIPP could be a tool to support empowerment. And we need to think, how can we use that to empower those people? Because otherwise it will not work.
I think fair awareness could be an answer, also on the very top, please, level of decision.
So I have a question for the panel regarding the incentives. So I find this discussion very, very relevant. And I'm wondering, what type of incentives do you guys think we need to create for people to start following FAIR principles? Who are the institutions that should create these incentives? And is there maybe technology that may help us to create these incentives?
I think that the incentives are there, right? We have to come up with a catalog of successful stories and concrete examples. For instance, this organization that I mentioned, so this is one type of stakeholder, the high management. So they said that managers are not interested. They're getting more increasingly interested because it's hurting their bottom line. They're wasting enormous amounts of money because of lack of productivity, because people are stuck trying to do the monkey work of finding the data and cleaning up, and because the data, everything is disorganized, right? For the researchers, or for let's say the data consumers, the people that are using data to analyze and everything, it seems to me that the incentives are quite clear. The easier they have, as easy it gets for them to find, to access, to interoperate, and to reuse, the more efficient will be their work. But we have to demonstrate what are these concrete steps to get concrete results. Because now we just have very nice slideware, and they say, yeah, but what's in my concrete example, right?
So I've seen, there was a study, I think it was PricewaterhouseCoopers did for the European Commission, saying that 80% of the resources on cross-disciplinary research goes to data wrangling. Not analyzing the data, just getting it ready to be analyzed. So what you say is utterly true. If you look to other large-scale metadata-based data sharing networks, and they exist, you will see that the key to convincing decision makers is return on investment. The thing about that, people, is that it is unbelievably real. If you build metadata systems based on data sharing, it saves a huge amount of money. We need to make that case, and not just to convince one by one the CEOs of organizations. SDMX, which I worked on, was mandated by Fiat, and that worked really well. If you get the commission to write the use of a standard into law, people actually have to do it. And that doesn't work in a lot of communities. But getting the backing of large regulatory bodies, as well as convincing people that there's a good return on investment, will do the job. I think it's serious business, though.
Hi, Alessa Gambardella from Leiden University as a data steward, and kind of comments on all of the comments. I think I guess the thing that I find that's still missing, and I mean, part of it is just people needing more people to do the tasks that are, needed. And so thinking of the social aspect and the technical aspect, it kind of reminds me of the golden triangle between process, technology, and people, and trying to balance that. And I think one of the things that we could maybe get from the FIPP by taking it a step further is the process that's needed. So even if you declare or want to declare where you're going, and I think that's what the workshops do, but being able to share that in a clear way that people can adopt the process that's used by another community. Because I think, well, researchers might want to do something, or where upper management want to commit to something because they might already be convinced there's a return on their investment, they don't necessarily know who's responsible for doing that and how to divide the roles between all of those stakeholders and the new stakeholder, which is the data steward. And I think it's still just the beginning of that, and the role of the data steward is still quite undefined. But I'm hoping that maybe that's something that can come out of all of these discussions, is more clarity on the process and how the people work together, and where technology can help support people's work. If anyone has a thought.
Yes, to continue the discussions, I think that with FIP we have the same issue, and we will meet again and again the same issues than with vocabularies and ontologies. When you write what to choose, how to choose, and what can do a data steward like my predecessor or me is to prepare the wall and to pre-select and to make a collection of actionable FIP for people that could use them. Even if you don't know exactly what is the data about, because in highly pathogenic agent, you have BSL4, and it's hidden data. It's a hidden word. But they have to use that. So it could be a good proposal to make this kind of collection of usable, not used, only usable FIP to promote the model.
Can I?
So there are so many. You wanted no. Okay. Then please go ahead.
Yeah, I think what Alice was saying, I think very relevant with the people, and I think training, and I think to make this FIPP actionable, I think we do also need a lot of basic trainings. So for Disco project, our stakeholders are these guys, in the museum. So we have big fancy museums like Naturalis, but we also have very small institutions, literally with the room and boxes. I mean, these people, if I go to them with a FIPP and data management plan, I mean, they have no idea what these things. So some of those very basic training, I think, can come from the GoFair Foundation and other stakeholders, along with the promotion of FIPP and thing. Otherwise, I think if we start from the FIPP and all this machine actionable, even from FDO, we miss the basic things, I think. Yeah.
Yes, we have fair awareness to start with before we talk about FIPs. Please.
Yeah, and I think that the importance of to tackle this problem with different types of stakeholders is fundamental. The situation is so messy that we now have people being forced to be involved in things that they don't have the background information to do that. Like non-technical researchers is choosing an ontology. How would they choose an ontology? They need to understand the ontological commitments of that model. Do they have the skill set to understand this? Or do they need to have an ontology engineer at their side to help in doing that? Planning for infrastructure to keep the data set alive for X amount of years. Are they system administrators? Do they have the knowledge to do that? So we need to clarify the roles and the responsibilities of these different types of stakeholders that have to work together in order to improve the whole data and services ecosystem.
And maybe coming back again to the kind of the technology point of view, I think it was always assumed from the beginning in FAIR that properly seen as tooling and infrastructure comes online, that the day-to-day consciousness around FAIR should sink into the background and kind of become embedded in the tooling, and it just becomes more of an automatic part of your daily life, that the tools you use will be trafficking in FAIR data. So we don't have to be so explicit about it. But then imagine there's this afternoon, the Leiden Declaration, and there's a commitment to FDOs, and in the next year there's some development, and maybe by this time next year there's actually a bona fide FDO spec. Everyone agrees on it, and industry comes in and starts building like crazy around it, and we get a whole new internet for data. In the FIPP might be for everybody then in F3, FDO. That how do you connect your data and metadata? FDO. And you might have a question about, well, okay, which implementation or which version of, but would that change the equation on the stakeholders? Would all of a sudden the high-level, C-level people and the lowly data stewards or researchers at the bench, they would just begin to see more and more tooling that's dealing in FDOs, and they might not even have to think about it anymore. Giancarlo.
Giancarlo Guizzardi, the University of Twente. I think I agree with what Luiz was saying, what the gentleman here was saying about the problem of selecting these ontologies and vocabularies, but it kind of presupposes that these things exist, that there are fair ontologies in all these different domains, right? And most of the ontologies that you find out there are just rubbish, right? Because people kind of assume that you can do this, you know, in an afternoon on Protégé and sitting together, you know, 3 people and so on. So the incentives are absolutely fundamental, and some of the communities manage to do this or putting this in law. For example, one example is the Financial Industry Business Ontology, FIPP, that basically mandate that all these financial institutions actually use this ontology. And then there was an incentive for OMG to standardize this and to get a lot of smart people together working seriously for a long period of time to get this going, right? So it's more messy, actually, than what you guys are saying, because these ontologies simply don't exist.
And if I may, so I agree with you. So I've been working on this issue of fair semantics for 3 years, because I think that you get tons of ontologies, but quality is varying. But also the way they are published, shared, is not necessarily, well, the best way to do. Like, I mean, we started thinking about ontologies as data. Well, you can look at how many ontologies are actually do not have any metadata at all about the ontology, right? So it's just like a URL. There's no definition on the concept. You don't even know what it is. Exactly. So, and if they are shared on GitHub. So it means that you need to download, parse to work with it. So we're trying to also change the community of practice of semantics and technicians to make them aware that it is important also for them to generate fair content so that people can reuse. Now, relating to FIPs, I think what is nice with the FIPs is that it is a sort of a guideline for helping organization and people to think about how do I want to implement FAIR. And the good thing with that is that it mix both sociological aspects, because, well, you need to have sort of guiding a discussion, but also there is a technical implementation, so that even if you have 10,000 different FIPs, well, you want to look at how you can interoperate between different communities. Well, you make some queries on your FIP, and you will look at where interoperability is not going to work. So, and that's why it's also important to link it with FDO. And I think to relate to Stian, there should go both ways, right? And I'll stop with Tobias.
Yeah, so I agree with respect to the ontologies, the interoperability. I think there's still a long way to go. So I think the tooling for many other aspects might already be there to do it, and maybe in some very narrow fields also interoperability works already reasonably well. But overall, I think we're still in a big void, and we have to do a lot of work. And I think what the FIPP does very well, and what we need to do for that as well, I believe, is first to kind of let it grow bottom up. So I think for some fields probably it's good to maybe tackle standardization and have some sort of top-down kind of pressure to converge. But in many others, we are not at that stage yet. We would standardize something that we don't know what it is, and that would only be counterproductive. So I think it's good if we let it grow from the bottom up. So if people realize a particular part doesn't have an ontology, let them define it in an afternoon in Protégé. We know it's going to be its version 0.1 or not even that. So it's not going to work in some ways, but it's going to be interesting ways. And further down the road, we will be able to standardize it. And then also have true interoperability, not just in the field, but across. So like globally over all scientific disciplines. And I think that's another thing that FAIR will facilitate, and also the FIPP specifically, that we don't need to see communities in such a narrow way. So communities can be something really fluid. You can belong to dozens of communities, some small, some large, most of them overlapping. So it's not that a community, they have their journal, they have their conferences, and then when they want to do some interdisciplinary or kind of crossing a research, they have to then kind of see what the data formats are and start thinking how they can make it interoperable. But that community doesn't even need to exist as such anymore in FAIR. It's kind of, you're just in that space of science, and it's all interoperable. So you don't even have interdisciplinary research in that sense, because it's just your point, your field that you're working on, and that, well, used to overlap several what once was called a discipline, but now it's just one big space. And I think that's what the FAIR principles are also about eventually. And in that respect, I think we're still very far from getting there. And the FIPs are a very, very good tool at this point to kind of sketch the path ahead of us, but it's still a long path to go.
Yeah, Alessandro Spinoso, KNMI, the Royal Institute of Meteorology in the Netherlands. I found all this conversation and discussion very comforting from the point of view of the experiences I had with FAIR and the frustration expressed by many of you. We are also in the process of hiring data stewards. The definition of a data steward is very vague. We are trying to give them instruction, bring them to this kind of venues. So it's all good that we are discussing all of this, but going to the actional part of this meeting, and we shouldn't forget that at the beginning of this session, Barbara asked for help. Yes. And we've been discussing social aspects and specification and technical implementation, and there was a whole plan, fantastic schema showed among all the components that should be linked together towards the FDO. But where is the priority where we can help, according to your experience? And yeah.
Subscribe, and then you will get emails, and we will have lots of work together. Not one. You will get one email, and then one space where we work together.
Can I just say that Barbara is the most machine-like of our machine actionable components in FAIR.
Yeah, I'm good in making people work together.
In getting everything done. I know that's. I try to keep up.
Just one comment on data stewards, because we have been working, trying to for many years, trying to convince organizations to hire data stewards, but I think that we have to be careful as well. What we mean by that, what we mean by data stewards. We had some very interesting slides that we are conflating a lot of different types of roles when you just say data steward. We have some data stewards that are more inclined or skilled to make data policies, organizational-wide data policies, and plan and communicate and engage with people to adopt those policies. There are others that are more technical, that are helping the people to take technological decisions or make data transformations, data wrangling, stuff like that. So we have different roles. It's going to be very hard to find one steward that can do all of that. So we have to consider that a data stewardship supporting a department of organization is a multidisciplinary team that will have different roles, will have different capabilities.
I would like to answer to this.
But you have to do it soon.
An answer how we can tackle this, because in Fair Connect we want to have people registering and then also saying where their skills are, and there will be a fair record if they want. It's not obligatory, but if they want to be part of the community, they have to say which skills they have. And then there are data stewards with different profiles, attending different events, getting different trainings. And then I think it's perfect, because okay, if I need more technical support, I will ask this person, and we will help each other.
Yeah, just on this talk about data stewards, isn't there a systemic paradox here that a project that's designed to increase machine actionability is going to need the recruitment of an army of data stewards to manage it?
I don't think that there is. I don't think that there is, because the machine actionability doesn't come falling from the sky, right? We have to build and design things to be machine actionable. So we have to have at least someone that's skilled to what are the steps, for instance, on software development, on design and everything, to make this supported.